productivity and sharing the benefits of making the workplace generally more productive. That was at the heart of enterprise bargaining, and some of us in this room have been around too long. Remember when that was, that was really the promise we were sold, shall I say. There are not many people who believe that anymore because it's simply not the experience. For people who are involved in bargaining, it is not about making the workplace more productive and sharing those benefits. Employers often come to the table and they just simply want to cut people's pay, cut conditions, claw back whatever they can. For people in the federal public service, 3 years in some cases, 4 years, they've been trying to secure collective agreements up against an employer that's offered, a package that effectively sees their working conditions go backwards. So taking away conditions, offering pay rises less than inflation, and expecting people to sign up to that. It's outrageous. So we have seen quite a big shift in what is a relatively short period of time, and I think it's come about because employers have been emboldened by the federal governments that we've had, the governments of first Howard, but then Abbott and now Turnbull. They've been emboldened to actually get aggressive with their workforces, start to savage and attack people's pay and conditions. And they've lawyered themselves up with their deep pockets. They've got plenty of money. So they've gone and got their lawyers and they've pushed the envelope on some of the laws. And that's why now we're seeing so many collective agreements get cancelled, and with every one, of course, it becomes easier and easier for the next employer to have a go. So we had this idea 100 years ago, that our IR laws would equalise bargaining power and give employees a fair chance at negotiating with their employer. But actually what we've got now are laws unfairly tilted towards the employers. They already have an enormous amount of power as the employer. They have unequal bargaining power. But these laws give them extra ways that they can in fact increase their bargaining position, make it harder for their employees. And so for that reason, we say these laws are broken. They do not serve the purpose that they should serve. And it's not a matter of just tinkering around with a few clauses to fix up those laws and make them kind of work again. That they're fundamentally flawed. And that it doesn't matter where you look, what you see is evidence that employees are doing it tough. I've already talked about the public sector and how difficult it has been there. And one of the key failings of the laws is there is no mechanism to force an employer to kind of come to the table with a reasonable proposition. The only thing employers can do is take industrial action, and in many cases in the public sector, they simply weren't able to, in fact, notoriously at border security, they weren't able to do that because that breached, the kind of, that they held up the sort of fear of terrorism, and the whole thing got closed down. So it's very difficult for groups of employers that want to get an agreement, but their employer refuses to do that. There's other examples. In WA, I've already said, agreements have been cancelled. At Murdoch University, 3,000 people affected. That is a big employer. That is a lot of people. They've had their agreement cancelled, and that is a significant consequence. Also at Griffin Coal, where it's devastated one of our local communities. But it's not just bargaining for people on the minimum wage. They are doing it tough. It's not that long ago, the idea of the minimum wage is that you could live on that and support a family. That there are not many people who could live on $36,000, which is what the minimum wage is in round terms, in Perth today. It's barely enough to support one person, and every year the minimum wage gets increased, but it gets generally increased by much less than the real costs of living that those people are facing. So we all know it. Power, transport, rent, all of that's going up astronomically. It's not going up by CPI. But the minimum wage just simply hasn't kept up. So they are doing it. Those people are doing it tough, and the system shows no sign of addressing the fundamental problem there. Minimum wages are just going down relative to average wages over a long period of time, and making it very difficult for people. In hospitality and retail, they've had their penalty rates cut. Once kind of unbelievable that we could have an industrial commission that would actually make laws that would reduce people's take-home pay in such an offhand way. But that's what's happened. The commission has a view that Sunday rates will just cut those. 700,000 people affected by that decision. And of course that's not the end of it. So the employers are all lining up now for other industries to have a go at cutting rates for other groups of workers as well. So we always understood that in the union movement, that taking it off retail and hospitality workers was just a thin end of the wedge. But now, of course, we're seeing that play out. And we're seeing increasingly just blatant wage theft. So it's not bad enough that the employers have got laws that favour them and allow them to take advantage of working people. We see over and over again too many examples where employers just simply are flat out exploiting their workforce. So at 7-Eleven, quite systematic, deliberately targeting the most vulnerable workers in the system, many of them young people on visas, because they knew they're the sort of people that won't complain about the fact they're getting ripped off, and if they do, we'll just deport them. We've seen lots of cases. It's not just 7-Eleven. We've seen it in Caltex. We've seen it in WA Enhanced Cafe. Just today in the paper, a chef owed $40,000. So these are frequent stories, and what they demonstrate is that there are employers that are not even trying to do the right thing, and in fact they're building their business model around the idea you can rip off your staff, which was exactly at the heart of 7-Eleven. Because if they had to actually pay their staff their proper reward rates, 7-Eleven would never be able to operate on the business model they've got. And that is a disgrace. It's a big multinational company built on systematic exploitation of working people. Shame. So you look around the system, it's difficult to enforce our rights in those sort of cases where people are being blatantly ripped off. It's time consuming, it's expensive. We've got the ABCC. So for some workers, not only do we say we're going to tilt the laws in the favour of the bosses, but for some industries, we're going to criminalise union activity as well. We're going to make it criminal for you to behave collectively, and we're going to take away some of your fundamental rights in doing that as well. It's an absolute disgrace. And just this week, the federal government is trying to extend those kind of laws across all industries as a way of really crippling the union movement. So there's lots of problems. And so for us, this is a campaign. When we say change the rules, we mean it. We've got to change the rules. It's not that we can just change a few clauses and maybe fix up bargaining. It really is, I think, a systematic failing of our laws to be able to deliver on the promise that we had, that they were laws that would allow working people to get a fair go from their employers and be able to get a fair pay outcome and be able to build a good life around a job. And at the heart of the success of, I think, the Australian economy and Australian society is that deal. That people in this country could get a job, they would be paid well enough to be able to build a life, and that then allowed them to build communities and families and all the rest of it. It's been one of the great successes, I think, of this country, but it's fundamentally under threat right now. Now, I don't have to tell the people in this room that it's not necessarily going to be easy to change the rules. There are a lot of powerful interests that like the industrial relations system the way it is, thanks very much, and they will argue, and they already are starting to show signs, that they want to argue vigorously to actually strip more rights from working people. Just last weekend, the Liberal Party conference in this state, as well as dealing with succession, wanted to abolish the minimum wage. Okay?
What?
And they seriously debated that resolution because, on 36,000 a year, clearly, we could take that away. So we should not kid ourselves about, our opponents and the fact that they will have their own list of things that they want to change. But what I know is that working people in this country are fair-minded, hard-working, good campaigners. And I know that working people, when they know it's fundamentally unfair, they say, that's not good enough, and I'm not going to cop that. And I hear it more and more. People are fed up, and they really are keen to see change. So change in our laws that will address the growing inequality in this country. Because if we don't do it at the moment in history that we have, it will get worse, and we will leave for our children and the workers that come after us a much more unequal society, but much more difficult employment as well. So we'll be, the campaign is already kind of underway in various forms, but we'll be launching it. We'll be having a delegates meeting on the 21st of September. So one of the key things is to talk to people about what's going on and talk to them about how they can get involved. Because lots of people are feeling different parts of the problem. And I think a lot of the time people think, oh, it's just me. It's just this industry that's having a hard time. But the reality is it's not. We share it in common. And I think it's really important that as a movement, people come together and understand that we have these things in common. And the CFMEU might have problems with the ABCC. In the federal public sector, they've got problems with bargaining. At Murdoch University, they've had agreements cancelled. There's people on the minimum wage that can't get by. But the symptom, the problem, is all the same. And so we should understand that it's not about just fixing the ABC, or it's not just about fixing bargaining, it's not just about fixing one part of it. It's really just fundamentally unfair, and it's up to us to campaign to change that. And I just want to finish on this one point, because, well, there's 2 points really. So one is the union movement in this country is still like, people want to say, union movement, you know, no one's in the union anymore, it's finished, it's all dried up, it's washed up, forget it. And the Liberals want to legislate us out of existence. But what I know is that the union movement in this